The gun pressed against Zachariah's temple felt cold as winter steel. But what truly chilled him was the hollow emptiness that made him wonder if pulling the trigger himself might be a mercy. He had been sitting in that dusty saloon in Beaver, Utah for 3 hours, his father's last gold coin spinning endlessly between his fingers, watching it catch the lamplight while he debated whether to spend it on whiskey or bullets. It was August of 1879, and the desert heat made everything shimmer like a mirage. Samuel had ridden into this God-forsaken mining town 2 days prior, following nothing but the wind and his own desire to disappear. At 26 years old, he had already lived more lifetimes than most men twice his age. The war had taken his brother. Disease had taken his mother. And just 6 months ago, a stagecoach robbery gone wrong had taken his father, shot down while trying to protect a strongbox that turned out to contain nothing but IOUs and broken promises. Samuel had been a different man before all that. People said he had his mother's laugh and his father's steady hands. He could track a rabbit through solid rock, shoot the wings off a fly at 50 paces, and gentle the wildest Mustang with nothing but patience and sugar cubes. But grief had a way of hollowing a man out from the inside, leaving nothing but a shell that went through the motions of living without remembering why. The coin stopped spinning. He caught it, feeling the weight of it in his palm. One gold eagle, $20 worth of metal that represented everything left of the Zachariah family fortune. His father had pressed it into his hand the day before he died, made him promise to use it for something that mattered. Samuel had carried it for months, unable to spend it, unable to let it go. Auction starting. Someone shouted from outside, and the saloon emptied like water through a sieve. Samuel remained seated, his whiskey untouched, watching dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight coming through the grimy window. "You coming?" the bartender asked, already untying his apron. Big excitement today. McAllister's selling off his assets before heading back east. Got everything from mining equipment to livestock. Even got himself a debt servant he is looking to unload. Samuel barely registered the words. He had seen plenty of debt auctions in his time. Desperate people selling their labor to pay off gambling debts, bad investments, or simple misfortune. The practice left a sour taste in his mouth, but it was legal, and in a territory where the law was whatever the man with the most guns said it was, legal meant precious little anyway. The bartender left. The saloon fell silent. Samuel stood, his knees creaking from sitting too long in one position, and walked to the window. Across the street, a crowd had gathered in the square outside the general store. At the center of the commotion stood Horace McAllister, a pot-bellied man in a suit too fine for the desert, gesturing wildly as he extolled the virtues of a steam-powered ore crusher. Samuel was about to turn away when he saw her. She stood on a raised platform behind McAllister, wrists bound with rope, her dark hair falling in tangled waves past her shoulders. Even from a distance, even through the heat shimmer and the press of bodies, Samuel could see the fierce pride in the way she held herself, chin raised, eyes blazing with an anger that seemed to set the very air on fire. Her dress was simple homespun, faded and dusty, but she wore it like armor. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, but there was something ancient in her gaze, something that had seen too much and survived anyway. Something in Samuel's chest twisted painfully. He had not felt anything beyond numbness for so long that the sudden spike of emotion actually made him stagger. His hand tightened around the gold coin until the edges bit into his palm. McAllister had moved on from mining equipment. And now, gentlemen, we come to the final item of the day. This here is Rose Sullivan, indentured for a period of 5 years to work off her late father's debts. She can cook, clean, and I am told she is adequate with horses. Strong back, all her teeth, and biddable enough with the right encouragement. He punctuated this last with a leer that made several men in the crowd laugh. Rose's expression never changed, but Samuel saw her hands clench into fists behind her back. Starting bid, $15, McAllister announced. 15. Called out a rancher Samuel recognized, a man known for working his hired hands until they dropped. 18, shouted another. Samuel watched Rose's face as the bids climbed. She stared straight ahead, looking at something far beyond the crowd, beyond the town, beyond the desert itself. There was no fear in her expression, no pleading, just a cold, burning determination that spoke of survival against impossible odds. 23. The latest bid came from a man in a black coat, his smile slick and predatory. Samuel had seen his type before. He would not be buying Rose's labor for cooking or cleaning. McAllister was grinning now, clearly pleased with the price. $23. Do I hear 24? 24 for 5 years of service, gentlemen. That is a bargain and a half. Samuel's feet were moving before his mind caught up. He pushed through the saloon doors, crossed the street, and shouldered his way through the crowd. The gold coin was in his hand, solid and real and suddenly full of purpose. $20, he called out. The crowd turned to look at him. McAllister frowned. We are already at 23, friend. You will need to bid higher than that. I am not bidding, Samuel said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. I am offering cash, $20 right now, gold. No credit, no promises. Real money. He held up the coin so it caught the sunlight, gleaming like a small sun. The crowd murmured. In a town where most transactions were done on credit or in silver, gold was rare. $20 in gold was worth more than 23 in promises, and everyone there knew it. McAllister's eyes narrowed with greed. Let me see that. Samuel tossed the coin to him. The man bit it, tested its weight, and nodded slowly. This is genuine. All right, friend, you got yourself a deal. 5 years of service, all legal and binding. He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, scrawled something on it, and thrust it toward Samuel. Sign here. No, Samuel's voice was steel. I want her papers, all of them. The original debt contract, the indenture agreement, everything. Now see here, that is irregular. You want the gold or not? Samuel's hand was resting on the butt of his revolver, not threatening, just present. A reminder. McAllister licked his lips, then nodded. Fine, fine. My clerk has them in the office. You can collect them after we conclude the sale. We will conclude it now. Samuel did not move his hand. Something in his eyes must have convinced McAllister this was not a man to argue with. He sent his clerk running, and 5 minutes later, Samuel was holding a sheaf of papers, scanning them quickly. The original debt had been $300, owed by one Patrick Sullivan for supplies purchased on credit. Patrick Sullivan had died of fever 4 months ago, and the debt had transferred to his daughter Rose. The indenture contract was for 5 years of service to pay off the debt plus interest. Samuel looked up at Rose for the first time. Up close, her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray-green and full of lightning. There was a cut on her cheekbone, half-healed, and her lips were cracked from the sun. She stared back at him with a mixture of defiance and exhaustion, waiting to see what new horror her life had brought her. "Can you read?" he asked quietly. "Yes." Her voice was hoarse, probably from lack of water. He held out the papers. "Read them." Confusion flickered across her face, but she took the papers, her bound hands making the task awkward. Her eyes moved quickly over the words, and he saw her swallow hard when she reached the end. "They are real," she said finally. That is my father's signature and mine." Samuel took the papers back, and then, before anyone could react, he tore them in half, then in half again, and again until the contract was nothing but confetti scattered by the desert wind. The crowd gasped. McAllister sputtered. "What in the hell do you think you are? I bought the debt," Samuel said calmly. "That makes the contract mine to do with as I please, and it pleases me to tear it up." He pulled out his knife, the blade catching the light, and cut the ropes binding Rose's wrists with one swift motion. "You are free." Rose stood frozen, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at her freed wrists, at the scattered pieces of paper, at Samuel's face. "I do not understand." "You do not owe anyone anything," Samuel said. "Not me, not McAllister, not anyone. Your father's debt is paid, and you are free to go wherever you want." For a long moment she just stared at him. Then her knees buckled. Samuel caught her before she hit the ground, and he realized she was laughing and crying at the same time, great shaking sobs that seemed to tear themselves from somewhere deep inside. "Easy," he said softly. "When is the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning," she managed. Samuel looked up at the crowd, which was beginning to disperse now that the show was over. McAllister had already vanished with his gold coin, probably afraid Samuel would change his mind and demand a refund. The sun was beating down mercilessly, and Rose was shaking in his arms despite the heat. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can try." He helped her down from the platform and across the street to the saloon. The bartender was back behind his counter, and he raised an eyebrow at Samuel's companion but said nothing. Samuel got Rose settled in a chair at a table in the back corner and ordered food, spending some of his dwindling silver on bread, cheese, dried beef, and 2 glasses of clean water. Rose drank the first glass in 3 gulps, then forced herself to slow down on the second. When the food came, she ate with the careful deliberation of someone who had gone hungry enough times to know not to rush. Samuel sat across from her, nursing his still untouched whiskey, and tried not to stare. "Why?" she asked finally, looking up from her plate. "Why would you do that?" "Spend your money on a stranger." Samuel turned the empty whiskey glass in his hands. "I needed a reason not to spend it on a bullet." The raw honesty of the statement seemed to catch her off guard. She studied his face, really looked at him for the first time, and something in her expression softened. "You do not look like a man ready to die." "I did not think I looked like one either, until I realized I could not remember the last time I cared whether I woke up in the morning." He met her eyes. "That coin was all I had left of my father. He made me promise to use it for something that mattered. I have been carrying it for 6 months, trying to figure out what that meant. When I saw you up on that platform, looking like you would rather burn the whole town down than bow your head, I knew." Rose was quiet for a long time. "Your father would be proud," she said finally. "Maybe. Or maybe he would tell me I was a fool for giving away $20 and getting nothing in return." "Nothing." Rose's laugh was sharp, but there was no malice in it. "You got my freedom. You got to spit in the face of men like McAllister who think people can be bought and sold like livestock. And maybe, if you are very lucky, you got a friend who will remember this for the rest of her life." "A friend," Samuel repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. He had not had a friend in a long time. "Unless you have somewhere else to be." Rose raised an eyebrow. "Because I have got nowhere to go and no money to get there. And you look like a man with no destination in mind. So maybe we can be 2 people with nothing, heading nowhere together." Samuel considered this. 24 hours ago, he had been alone with his grief and his father's gold coin, seriously contemplating whether the world would miss him if he disappeared from it. Now he was sitting across from a woman with fire in her eyes and a laugh like breaking glass, and for the first time in months, He felt something that might have been hope stirring in his chest. "I have got a horse," he said, "and a bedroll, maybe $15 in silver, and a rifle that needs a new sight. I have got the clothes on my back," Rose said, "and hands that know how to work, and a stubborn refusal to give up even when I should. Then I suppose we are evenly matched." Rose smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "I suppose we are." They left Beaver 3 hours later, riding double on Samuel's horse because Rose had nothing of her own. She sat behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek pressed against his back. He could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, and it gave rhythm to his own. "Where are we going?" she asked as the town disappeared behind them. "North," Samuel said. "I heard there is work in the Mormon settlements up that way, ranches that need hands, farms that need help with harvest, honest work." "Honest work sounds good." She was quiet for a moment. "Samuel?" "Yes, thank you. I know I already said it, but I need you to understand. When my father died, McAllister came to me with his ledgers and his lawyer, and they told me I had two choices. I could work off the debt, or they could have me arrested for theft. He said my father had taken goods on credit, and credit was a debt of honor, and a debt of honor passed to the family. I thought about running. But where would I go? I have got no family, no money, no skills beyond what any farm girl learns, and McAllister had men watching me. So I signed the papers because I did not know what else to do." Her arms tightened around him. "For 4 months I worked in his house. I cooked his meals and cleaned his floors and told myself I just had to survive. But today, when he put me on that platform and started taking bids, I realized that surviving was not enough. I would rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And then you appeared like something out of a dream, and you gave me back my life." Samuel's throat was tight. "You do not owe me anything. I know. That is what makes it matter." They rode in comfortable silence after that, the desert stretching out around them in shades of red and gold. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that looked like the world was on fire. Samuel had ridden this same country 100 times before, but somehow it looked different now. More vivid, more real. They made camp that night in a small canyon where a trickle of water ran year-round. Samuel built a fire while Rose tended to the horse, talking to the animal in a low, soothing voice. She had been telling the truth about knowing horses. The gelding, who usually shied away from strangers, was nuzzling her palm within minutes. "What is his name?" she called. "Dusty." "Original, I know. It suits him." She ran her hand down the horse's nose. "He is a good boy." Samuel had brought minimal supplies, but he managed to put together a decent meal of beans, hardtack softened in water, and coffee. They ate sitting on opposite sides of the fire, the flames dancing between them. "Tell me about your father," Rose said. Samuel was surprised by the question. People usually avoided talking about the dead as if grief were contagious. But there was genuine curiosity in Rose's face, and he found himself wanting to answer. "He was a good man," Samuel said slowly. "The kind who kept his word even when it cost him. He and my mother had a small ranch in Wyoming, nothing fancy, but they made it work. My brother and I grew up learning to ride and rope and shoot. We were happy." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Then the war came. Jacob, my brother, he enlisted, said it was his duty. He died at Shiloh, never even saw the man who shot him. My mother took it hard. She got sick that winter and just never got better. I think she lost the will to live. My father tried to hold the ranch together, but without Jacob, without my mother, his heart was not in it. We sold the place and started drifting. He did odd jobs, I did odd jobs, and we just kept moving. Then 6 months ago he took work as a guard on a stagecoach. Bandits hit them outside of Cheyenne. He died protecting a strongbox full of paper. I am sorry," Rose said quietly. "Me too." Samuel looked up at her. "What about your father?" Rose was silent for so long he thought she might not answer. Then she sighed. "He was a dreamer. Always had some scheme to strike it rich, some plan to make our fortune. We came from Illinois, following his dream of silver mines and endless opportunity, but the reality never lived up to the dream. He bounced from job to job, town to town, always sure the next one would be different. He bought supplies on credit from McAllister because he was certain his claim would pay out. But it never did. He died of fever in McAllister's back room, owing money he never had. And I was left holding the debt." "He loved you," Samuel said with certainty. "How do you know?" "Because you are still defending him, still calling him a dreamer instead of a fool. That kind of loyalty comes from love." Rose's eyes shimmered in the firelight. "He did love me. He was just not very good at showing it in ways that mattered." They sat in silence after that, watching the fire burn down to coals. The desert night was cold despite the day's heat, and Samuel spread out his bedroll, gesturing for Rose to take it. "What about you?" she asked. "I will be fine by the fire. We can share." She said it matter-of-factly, without any hint of impropriety. "Body heat will keep us both warmer." Samuel hesitated, but she was right. He nodded, and they arranged themselves on the bedroll, lying side by side with a careful few inches of space between them. The stars overhead were brilliant, a river of light across the black sky. "Samuel," Rose's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yes." "When you said you needed a reason not to spend that coin on a bullet, did you mean it?" He could have lied. Should have lied. But something about the night and the stars and the strange intimacy of lying next to someone who knew what it meant to have nothing made him tell the truth. "Yes." "Are you still thinking about it?" "No." He was surprised to realize it was true. "For the first time in months I am thinking about tomorrow." He felt her hand find his in the darkness, her fingers threading through his. "Good. Because I have been thinking about tomorrow too, and I would like you to be in it." Samuel's chest ached with an emotion he could not name. He squeezed her hand gently, and they fell asleep like that, two broken people holding onto each other in the dark. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. They traveled north through the desert, moving slowly to spare the horse. Samuel hunted when he could, bringing down rabbits and the occasional sage hen. Rose proved to be an excellent camp cook, able to turn even the most meager ingredients into something filling. They talked as they rode, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. Rose had opinions on subjects Samuel had never even thought about, from the politics of territorial governance to the best way to train a dog. She was fiercely intelligent, her mind quick and curious, and Samuel found himself actually looking forward to their debates. They reached a small farming community called Pleasant Grove after a week of travel. It was a Mormon settlement, neat and orderly, with fields of wheat stretching out like a golden ocean. Samuel asked around and found work on a ranch belonging to a man named Brother Hanson, who needed help repairing fences and preparing for winter. The pay was fair, and Brother Hanson offered to let them stay in a small cabin on the property in exchange for Rose helping his wife with the autumn canning. It was the first real stability either of them had known in a long time. Samuel woke each morning to the smell of Rose cooking breakfast, spent his days working alongside good men who asked no questions about his past, and returned each evening to find Rose waiting with stories about her day. She and Sister Hanson had become fast friends, and Rose's natural skill with preserving and cooking was much appreciated. The cabin had only one room, but they had fallen into an easy domestic routine. Samuel slept on the floor near the stove, insisting Rose take the cot. They took turns heating water for washing, carefully giving each other privacy. It was proper, respectable. And yet Samuel found himself increasingly aware of Rose's presence in ways that had nothing to do with propriety. The way she hummed while she worked. The way her hair caught the lamplight. The way she laughed, full-throated and genuine, when something struck her as funny. The way she looked at him sometimes, when she thought he was not paying attention, with an expression he could not quite read. One evening, about 3 weeks into their stay at the Hanson Ranch, Samuel returned from work to find Rose sitting on the steps of the cabin, staring at the sunset. There was something in her posture that made him hesitate. "Everything all right?" he asked. She looked up and he saw tears on her cheeks. "Sister Hanson asked me today when you and I were planning to get married." Samuel's heart lurched. "What did you tell her?" "I told her we were not engaged, that you were just helping me get back on my feet." Rose wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked so shocked. "She said it was improper for us to be living together if we were not married or at least betrothed. She did not say I needed to leave, but I could tell she was thinking it." Samuel sat down next to her on the steps. "We could tell people we are married. Just say the words and let them believe it." "No." Rose's voice was firm. "I will not lie to these people. They have been nothing but kind to us. And besides, what happens when we move on? When you decide you have had enough of dragging around a woman you got stuck with out of pity." "Pity?" Samuel turned to look at her. "Is that what you think this is?" "What else would it be?" She met his eyes. "You bought me because you felt sorry for me. You let me come with you because you are a good man who does not like to see people suffer, but that is not the same as wanting me here." Samuel's response was instinctive. He reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Rose Sullivan, you are the most stubborn, infuriating, brilliant woman I have ever met. You drive me crazy with your arguing and your absolute refusal to admit when you are wrong about something. You snore when you sleep, and you use all the hot water, and you have an opinion about everything from politics to the proper way to saddle a horse. And I wake up every morning grateful that you are here, because you make me want to be alive. Not just surviving, not just going through the motions, but actually living. So no, this is not pity. This has not been pity for a long time." Rose's breath caught. "Samuel, I am not good with words," he continued. "I spent the last 6 months trying to figure out how to die, and then you came along and reminded me how to live. I do not know what I am doing. I do not have money or prospects or anything to offer you beyond a beat-up horse and a handful of silver. But I know that when I think about tomorrow, you are in it. And when I think about the day after that, you are in it too. And every day after that, for as long as you will have me." Rose's eyes were wide, shining with tears in the fading light. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Samuel realized that he was. The thought did not terrify him the way it should. Instead, it felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. "Yes, I am asking. I am asking if you would take a chance on a broken-down cowboy with more ghosts than prospects, who cannot promise you anything except that he will wake up every day and choose you." "You are not broken," Rose said fiercely. "You are healing. There is a difference." She took his hand, the same way she had that first night under the stars. "And yes, my answer is yes. I will marry you, Samuel Zachariah, because you gave me back my life, and I cannot think of anyone I would rather share it with." Samuel kissed her then, soft and gentle, tasting salt from her tears and sweetness from the honey cake she had been baking earlier. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, and for a moment, the whole world narrowed down to just the two of them. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and decided to step into the light together. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the Mormon church. Brother and Sister Hanson stood as witnesses, and the whole community turned out to celebrate. Rose wore a dress that Sister Hanson had helped her make, simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Samuel wore his cleanest shirt and spent an hour trying to tame his hair into something presentable. The ceremony was brief, but the words felt like a vow carved into stone. To have and to hold, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death parted them. Samuel spoke his vows in a steady voice, meaning every word, and when Rose spoke hers, her voice rang out clear and strong. They celebrated with a community meal, and Samuel was surprised by how many people came up to congratulate them, to offer advice or well wishes. These were good people, he realized. People who built communities and helped their neighbors and believed in second chances. It felt good to be part of something again, to belong somewhere. That night, in the privacy of their cabin, Rose sat on the edge of the cot and looked up at Samuel with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. He sat down next to her, taking her hand. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said quietly. Rose smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I know, but I want to be your wife in every way that matters." They came together slowly, carefully, learning each other with gentle touches and whispered words. Samuel had been with women before, quick encounters born of loneliness and opportunity, but this was different. This was Rose, his wife, the woman who had saved him as surely as he had saved her. Every kiss, every caress felt like a promise, and when they finally joined together, it was with a sense of rightness that made Samuel's throat tight with emotion. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow cot, Rose's head on Samuel's chest, his arm around her shoulders. He could feel her heartbeat against his ribs, steady and strong. "I love you," Rose said quietly. "I do not know when it happened. Maybe it was when you tore up those papers, or maybe it was when you told me about your father, or maybe it was some moment in between. But I love you, Samuel Zachariah, and I am glad I get to spend the rest of my life showing you." Samuel's eyes burned. "I love you too. I did not think I had it in me anymore, but you proved me wrong. You keep proving me wrong about everything, and I am grateful for it." Rose laughed softly. "Get used to it. I plan on spending the next 50 years proving you wrong. I look forward to it." They stayed at the Hanson ranch through the autumn, working and saving every penny they could. Samuel proved his worth as a ranch hand, and Brother Hanson offered him a permanent position as foreman if they wanted to stay. It was tempting, the security of it, but both Samuel and Rose felt the pull of something more. They sat on the steps one evening in late October, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, and Rose leaned against Samuel's shoulder. "I have been thinking," she said. "Dangerous," Samuel teased. She elbowed him gently. "Hush." "I have been thinking about what we want to do. We could stay here. It is safe and the people are kind and we would never want for work. But is that what you want? To spend the rest of your life working someone else's land?" Samuel considered this. "What do you want?" "I want a place of our own," Rose said. "Nothing fancy. Just a little piece of land where we can build something that is ours, where we can raise horses or cattle or children or maybe all three, where we can be our own people, not just ranch hands or hired help, but owners, partners. That takes money. I know, but we have been saving, and if we keep working through the winter, by spring we might have enough to file a homestead claim. We could get 160 acres of land for free if we prove it up, build a house, farm it for 5 years. Samuel turned the idea over in his mind. It was ambitious, maybe even foolhardy. But the more he thought about it, the more it felt right. He and Rose had both spent their lives drifting, following other people's dreams. Maybe it was time to build a dream of their own. "Where would we go?" he asked. Rose pulled a folded newspaper from her pocket. I saw this in Sister Hanson's kitchen. There is land available in the Wyoming Territory near the Big Horn Mountains. Good grazing land, water year-round, and the territory is offering incentives for settlers. We could file a claim in the spring, spend the summer building, and be settled before next winter. Samuel took the newspaper, scanning the article. It was a lot of work, a lot of risk, but it was also a lot of possibility. You really want to do this? I want to do this with you, Rose said. I want us to build something that matters, something we can be proud of. Samuel folded the newspaper and handed it back to her. Then we will do it. We will work through the winter, save every penny, and come spring, we will head to Wyoming and stake our claim. Rose's smile was brighter than the sunset. She kissed him, soft and sweet, and Samuel wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. For the first time in his life, he could see a future that extended beyond tomorrow, a future full of possibility and hard work and love. They told Brother Hanson of their plans the next day. He was disappointed to lose them, but understanding. He even offered to write them a letter of recommendation, should they need it, and gave them advice about homesteading that he had learned from his own father. Winter in Pleasant Grove was mild compared to what Samuel had known in Wyoming, but it was still cold enough that they spent most evenings huddled by the stove, planning their future. Rose drew sketches of the house she wanted to build, a simple cabin with a stone fireplace and a covered porch. Samuel made lists of supplies they would need, tools and seeds and livestock. They debated everything from the best breed of cattle to the ideal placement of the barn. You realize we are going to argue about every single decision we make, Rose said one night, laughing. I am counting on it, Samuel replied. What fun would it be if you just agreed with everything I said? No fun at all. But you had better get used to being wrong because I am usually right. Usually, fine, always. Samuel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I love you, you impossible woman. Good, because you are stuck with me now. Christmas came, and the community held a celebration that reminded Samuel of better times, of his childhood before the war and the grief. Rose baked pies with Sister Hanson, and Samuel helped build the bonfire that would burn all night on Christmas Eve. They sang carols and ate too much food and laughed until their sides hurt. On Christmas morning, Samuel gave Rose a small leather-bound journal he had bought from the general store. For writing down your thoughts, he said, or recipes, or whatever you want. Rose's eyes filled with tears. Samuel, this is too much. No, it is not. You have been talking about wanting to write things down to keep track of our journey, so now you can. Rose threw her arms around him, holding tight. Thank you. I love it. She gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, sturdy canvas with careful stitching and buttons carved from bone. For when we are building our house, you are going to need something that can stand up to hard work. Samuel pulled it on over his undershirt, feeling the weight of it, the care she had put into every stitch. It is perfect. You are perfect, she corrected, kissing him soundly. The winter passed slowly but not unpleasantly. Samuel and Rose grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Rose discovered that Samuel had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh until she cried. Samuel discovered that Rose sang when she was happy, old Irish ballads her mother had taught her. By February, they had saved nearly $200, more money than either of them had ever possessed. They kept it in a tin box under the floorboards, counting it each week and adding to it whenever they got paid. It represented freedom, possibility, a future they were building together. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first green shoots appeared in the fields, they said their goodbyes to Pleasant Grove. Sister Hanson cried and made Rose promise to write. Brother Hanson shook Samuel's hand and told him he was a lucky man. Samuel agreed wholeheartedly. They headed north on a cool spring morning, Dusty loaded down with their supplies. They had sold or traded for everything they thought they might need. Tools, seeds, a milk cow named Betsy who walked placidly beside the horse, chickens in a crate, a plow, nails, rope, canvas for a temporary shelter. It was everything they owned in the world, and it felt like abundance. The journey to Wyoming took 3 weeks. They followed wagon trails and river valleys, camping under the stars and stopping in small towns to resupply. Rose wrote in her journal every night, recording the details of their journey, the people they met, the land they crossed. "I want our children to know this," she explained to Samuel. "I want them to know how we started, what we built from nothing." Samuel liked when she talked about their children, hypothetical people who did not exist yet, but already felt real in his imagination. He pictured a little girl with Rose's eyes and stubborn chin, or a boy with his father's steady hands. It was a future worth working for. They reached the Big Horn region in mid-April, and Samuel understood immediately why Rose had chosen this place. The land rolled out in gentle hills covered in new grass, and the mountains rose in the distance like a promise. There were cottonwood trees along the creeks and pines on the slopes, and the air smelled of sage and possibility. They rode to the land office in a town called Sheridan and filed their claim. 160 acres of unclaimed land, theirs for the cost of the filing fee if they could prove it up within 5 years. The clerk gave them a map showing the boundaries of their property, and Samuel and Rose rode out to see it with their hearts in their throats. It was everything they had hoped for. A creek ran through the eastern edge of the property, providing year-round water. There was good grazing land for cattle, a stand of timber for building, and a natural meadow that would be perfect for planting hay. In the center of it all was a small rise that overlooked the entire valley, and Rose pointed to it immediately. "That is where we will build the house," she said, "so we can see the sunrise." They spent the first month living in a canvas tent while they worked on building the cabin. It was back-breaking labor, felling trees and stripping logs, digging a foundation and laying stone. Samuel had built before, but never anything this substantial, and there were days when he fell into their bedroll so exhausted he could barely move. But Rose worked right alongside him, her hands blistering and then callousing, her face tanned from the sun. She never complained, never faltered, and her determination drove him forward even when his body screamed for rest. By June, they had 4 walls, a roof, and a stone fireplace that drew properly. It was crude, rough-hewn and drafty, but it was theirs. They moved their few possessions inside, hung a door Samuel had built by hand, and that night they made love on the floor of their own house on their own land, under a roof they had built together. "We did it," Rose whispered, her voice full of wonder. "We actually did it." Samuel held her close, feeling the weight of her against him, the realness of this moment. 6 months ago, he had been a hollow man holding his father's last coin and contemplating death. Now he was lying in a house he had built with his own hands, holding a woman he loved more than his own life, on land that belonged to them. The transformation felt impossible, miraculous. "We did it together," he corrected. "Everything we have, everything we are, we built it together." "Together," Rose agreed and kissed him until the world narrowed down to just the two of them, the way it always did. The summer was a blur of work. They planted a kitchen garden near the house, and Rose tended it carefully, coaxing vegetables from the rocky soil. Samuel built a barn for Dusty and Betsy and fenced in a small pasture. They bought 6 heifers and a bull from a neighboring rancher, paying with some of their precious savings, and watched their herd begin to grow. The neighboring ranchers were a mixed bunch. Some were welcoming, offering advice and help when needed. Others were suspicious of newcomers, protective of their water rights and grazing land. Samuel and Rose navigated these relationships carefully, always respectful, always fair, slowly earning trust through hard work and honest dealing. In August, Rose missed her monthly courses. She did not say anything at first, afraid to hope, but when September came and went with no sign, she finally told Samuel. They were sitting on the porch he had built onto the front of the cabin, watching the sunset when she took his hand and placed it on her belly. "There is a baby," she said softly. "Our baby." Samuel felt his breath catch. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor." "But I know my body and I know what this means." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "We are going to be parents, Samuel." The joy that flooded through him was so intense it was almost painful. A baby, their child. Proof that life went on, that love created more love, that the future was real and waiting. He pulled Rose into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "I am going to be a father," he said, testing the words. "The best father," Rose said confidently. "Our child is going to be so loved." "Loved and spoiled rotten," Samuel agreed. "I am going to build them a cradle and toys, and when they are old enough I will teach them to ride. And I will teach them to read and cook and stand up for what is right," Rose added. She leaned back against him, her hand covering his on her belly. "We are going to be all right, are we not?" "Better than all right," Samuel promised. "We are going to be happy." The pregnancy progressed through the autumn. Rose's belly grew round, and Samuel found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body, the way their child was growing inside her. He became overprotective, insisting she rest more, worrying every time she lifted something heavy. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Rose protested, but she softened it with a kiss. "Though I appreciate the concern." They prepared for the baby's arrival with the same determination they had brought to everything else. Samuel built a cradle from pine, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Rose sewed tiny clothes from fabric she traded for eggs in town. They stockpiled supplies, knowing that once the baby came, trips to town would be more difficult. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that blanketed the valley in white. Samuel made sure they had enough firewood to last through the cold months, stacking it high against the side of the cabin. Rose cooked and preserved food, filling their small root cellar with enough to see them through. On a cold night in late January, exactly 1 year after Samuel had bought Rose's freedom in Beaver, their daughter was born. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Samuel feared he might lose them both. But Rose was strong, stronger than anyone he had ever known, and when the baby finally arrived, red-faced and screaming, Samuel felt tears streaming down his face. "A girl," Rose said wonderingly, holding their daughter against her chest. "We have a daughter, Samuel." The baby was perfect, with a fuzz of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same storm gray as her mother's. Samuel touched her tiny hand, and her fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. "What should we name her?" he asked. Rose smiled tiredly. "I was thinking Sarah." "After your mother." Samuel's throat closed. "Are you certain she should be named after someone brave?" Rose said. "Someone who knew how to love even when it was hard. Your mother was that person, was she not?" "Yes," Samuel managed. "She was." So Sarah, Zachariah, came into the world, born into a rough cabin on a homestead in Wyoming, daughter of a cowboy who had almost given up and a woman who refused to quit. She was tiny and loud and demanding, and Samuel fell in love with her instantly, completely, the same way he had fallen in love with her mother. The first few months were exhausting. Sarah was a colicky baby, crying for hours every evening. Samuel and Rose took turns walking her, singing to her, doing anything to soothe her. There were nights when Samuel was so tired he could barely stand, but then he would look at Rose, rocking their daughter by firelight, and feel a surge of love so powerful it made everything else fade into insignificance. Spring came again, bringing with it the renewal of life. The grass turned green, the creek ran high with snowmelt, and their cattle dropped calves that gamboled in the pasture. Sarah grew, her colic fading, her personality beginning to emerge. She had Rose's stubbornness and what Samuel suspected was his mother's gentle temperament, a combination that made her both delightful and challenging. In April, a letter arrived from Pleasant Grove. Sister Hanson wrote that she had thought of them often, wondered how they were faring. Rose wrote back, filling pages with news of their homestead, their daughter, their life. It felt good to maintain that connection, to know they were not entirely alone in the world. As summer arrived, Samuel and Rose celebrated their second wedding anniversary with a simple meal and a toast to the future. They had been married for 2 years, together for nearly 18 months, and in that time, they had built something real and lasting. "You ever regret it?" Rose asked that night after Sarah was asleep in her cradle. "Spending your last coin on me, you could have used it for so many other things." Samuel pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "My father told me to use it for something that mattered. I bought your freedom, and in doing so, I saved my own life. You gave me a reason to keep going when I had none. So no, I do not regret it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Even knowing all the work and hardship that came with it, especially knowing that," Samuel said firmly. "The work made us strong. The hardship made us grateful, and every moment of struggle was worth it to end up here with you, with Sarah, with this life we have built." Rose's eyes were bright with tears. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes. What if something happens? What if I lose you?" "You will not lose me," Samuel promised. "I am not going anywhere. We have at least 50 more years of arguing ahead of us, remember?" Rose laughed through her tears. "50 years of me proving you wrong. I look forward to every minute of it." The years rolled on, each one bringing its own challenges and triumphs. Their cattle herd grew, and they proved up their homestead claim, receiving the deed to their land after 5 years of hard work. Samuel built additions onto the cabin as they needed more space, and Rose planted a proper garden with vegetables and herbs and flowers. Sarah grew into a lively child with her mother's quick mind and her father's steady hands. She learned to ride almost before she could walk, sitting in front of Samuel on Dusty's back, her laughter ringing across the valley. She helped Rose in the garden and followed Samuel around the ranch, asking endless questions about everything she saw. When Sarah was 4, Rose became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1884 they welcomed a son. They named him Jacob Patrick, for Samuel's brother and Rose's father, a way of honoring the people they had lost while celebrating the life they had created. Jacob was an easier baby than Sarah had been, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. He adored his older sister, who appointed herself his protector and guide. Samuel watched them play together and felt his heart swell with gratitude. The homestead prospered. Samuel proved to be a skilled rancher, and their cattle brought good prices at market. They paid off their remaining debts and even managed to save a little, building a nest egg for the future. Rose became known in the area for her skill with herbs and healing, and neighbors often rode out to seek her advice when someone was ill. They were not wealthy, not by any measure, but they were comfortable. More importantly, they were happy. Samuel woke each morning next to the woman he loved, spent his days working land that belonged to him, and fell asleep each night to the sound of his children breathing in the next room. It was everything he had never known he wanted, everything he had almost given up without ever having. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Rose stood on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunrise paint the valley gold. Sarah was 8, Jacob was 6, and a third child was on the way, due in the fall. The cabin had been expanded twice and now boasted 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a stone addition that served as a parlor. The barn was solid and weather-tight, the fences were all in good repair, and their herd numbered over 50 head. "You remember the first time we saw this place?" Rose asked, leaning against Samuel's shoulder. "I remember thinking it looked like the edge of the world," Samuel said. "Like we were starting over in a place where no one knew us, where we could be anyone we wanted to be." "And who did we decide to be?" "Ourselves," Samuel said simply. "Just ourselves, but better, stronger, happier." Rose turned to face him, her hands on his chest. "I have been thinking about that day in Beaver, the day you bought my freedom. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had not been there. If you had spent your father's coin on something else, or if you had walked away." "But I did not," Samuel said firmly. "I was there and I saw you and I knew. Maybe I did not understand it then, but I know now. You were not just my reason to live. You were my reason to hope. My reason to believe that broken things could be made whole again." "You saved me," Rose said. "No," Samuel corrected gently. "We saved each other. That is what love is it not? 2 people choosing each other every day and building something together that neither could build alone." Rose kissed him, soft and lingering, and Samuel wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. They had come so far from that dusty town square, from the auction block and the torn-up papers and the single gold coin that had changed everything. They had built a life, a family, a home. They had taken their pain and their loss and their grief, and they had transformed it into something beautiful. The sun continued to rise, flooding the valley with light, and Samuel thought about his father. He wondered if the old man would be proud of what he had done with that final gift, that last gold coin. He liked to think so. He liked to think his father was looking down, seeing the home Samuel had built, the family he had created, the woman he had chosen to love. "Thank you," he whispered, not sure if he was talking to his father or to Rose or to whatever force had brought them together. "Thank you for this." Rose pulled back to look at him, a question in her eyes. "For everything," Samuel clarified. "For being stubborn enough to survive. For being brave enough to hope. For choosing me over and over again every single day. Always," Rose promised. "For the rest of our lives I will always choose you." The children woke soon after, and the day began in earnest. There was breakfast to make and chores to do, and 100 small tasks that made up the rhythm of their life. But throughout it all, Samuel found himself smiling, grateful in a way that went bone deep. That autumn, Rose gave birth to another daughter whom they named Lily. She had Samuel's dark hair and Rose's fierce spirit, and she completed their family in a way they had not known they needed. Sarah was thrilled to have a sister, and Jacob appointed himself the baby's protector, hovering anxiously whenever anyone held her. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and harvests and the slow, steady growth of their children. Sarah grew into a young woman who could rope a calf and recite Shakespeare with equal ease. Jacob showed his father's gift with horses, able to gentle the wildest bronco with patience and understanding. Lily was the adventurer, always climbing trees and exploring the creek, coming home with skinned knees and stories of her discoveries. Samuel and Rose grew older together, their hands calloused from work, their faces lined by sun and wind and laughter. Rose's dark hair began to show threads of silver, and Samuel's beard went gray at the edges. But they were still the same two people who had found each other in Beaver, still choosing each other every day, still building their life one moment at a time. When Sarah turned 18, a young rancher's son began calling on her. His name was William Turner, and he was respectful and hardworking, with kind eyes and a good reputation. Samuel liked him, though it pained him to think of losing his daughter. Rose reminded him that they were not losing her, just gaining a son. The wedding was held at their homestead on a bright June day. The whole valley turned out to celebrate, and Samuel walked Sarah down the makeshift aisle with tears in his eyes. She was beautiful in a dress Rose had sewn, her face radiant with happiness, and Samuel remembered the day she was born, the way she had wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. "Take care of her," he told William fiercely. "With my life," William promised, and Samuel believed him. Sarah and William built a cabin on the adjoining property, and Samuel gained not just a son-in-law but a partner in running the ranch. William was smart and eager to learn, and he treated Sarah with the kind of respect and love that made Rose squeeze Samuel's hand and whisper, "She chose well." Jacob was 15 when he announced he wanted to be a veterinarian. He had always been good with animals, able to sense when something was wrong and how to fix it. Samuel and Rose scraped together the money to send him to school in Cheyenne. And though they missed him terribly, they were proud beyond words. Lily showed no signs of settling down, much to her parents' amusement. She helped run the homestead with fierce competence, and she had already turned down 3 marriage proposals, declaring that she had no interest in becoming anyone's wife until she had seen more of the world. "She has your stubbornness," Samuel told Rose. "And your wandering spirit," Rose countered. "Remember, you spent years drifting before you found your purpose." "I found my purpose when I found you," Samuel said, pulling her close. Even after 30 years of marriage, the words still made Rose blush. "You old romantic." "Always," Samuel agreed, and kissed her the way he had that first night on the platform in Beaver, when she had been a stranger with fire in her eyes, and he had been a broken man looking for a reason to live. The ranch prospered under the combined efforts of Samuel, Rose, William, and Lily. They expanded their herd, improved their breeding stock, and earned a reputation for quality cattle throughout the territory. Jacob came home after completing his studies and set up a veterinary practice in Sheridan, visiting the homestead regularly to check on the animals and his family. Samuel was in his late 50s when Wyoming became a state, and he rode into town with Rose to cast his ballot in the election, grateful to be part of this new chapter in history. Rose, too, voted, Wyoming being one of the first places to grant women that right, and Samuel was proud to stand beside her as she exercised that hard-won freedom. They continued to work the ranch together, though the pace slowed as they aged. There were grandchildren now, Sarah and William's children, who came to visit and learn about ranching from their grandparents. Samuel taught them to ride and rope, just as he had taught their mother. Rose told them stories and taught them to read, passing on the love of learning that had sustained her through hard times. One evening, when Samuel was 62 and Rose was 59, they sat on their porch watching another sunset. The children were grown, the ranch was thriving, and they had built something that would outlast them. Samuel held Rose's hand, her fingers threaded through his, the same way they had been that first night under the stars. "You remember when I asked you what you wanted," Samuel said. "Back in Pleasant Grove when you told me you wanted a place of our own." "I remember everything," Rose said softly. "Every conversation, every moment, they are all precious to me." "We did it," Samuel said. "We built something that matters, something we can be proud of." "We built a life," Rose corrected. "We built love. We built a family. We took 2 broken people and made them whole." Samuel kissed her hand, feeling the strength in her fingers, the calluses earned from decades of hard work. "I spent my last gold coin on you, and it was the best decision I ever made. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning. You gave me myself back when I thought I had lost it forever." Rose's eyes shimmered with tears. "You gave me freedom, but more than that, you gave me choice. You could have demanded anything from me, but instead you asked. You chose me, and you let me choose you, and that has made all the difference." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The valley that had once seemed like the edge of the world had become the center of their universe, and Samuel could not imagine being anywhere else. Lily came out to join them, now a woman of 26 who had finally agreed to marry a surveyor she had met in town. "Sarah and William are coming for dinner tomorrow," she announced, "and Jacob is bringing his new wife to meet everyone." "Another wedding," Rose said happily. "This family keeps growing." "That is what happens when you start with two people who refuse to quit," Lily said, kissing her mother's cheek. "You taught us that love and hard work can build anything." After Lily went back inside, Samuel pulled Rose closer. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one," Rose said firmly. "Every choice, every hardship, every moment of joy brought us here, and here is exactly where I want to be. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts," Rose said. "They made us appreciate the good parts that much more." Samuel thought about that first day in Beaver, about the man he had been. Lost, grieving, ready to give up. He thought about the gold coin spinning between his fingers, about the woman on the platform with fury in her eyes. He thought about torn papers blowing in the wind, about a kiss that tasted of tears and honey, about a baby's first cry and a homestead rising from nothing. "I love you," he said, the words as true now as they had been 30 years ago. "I will love you until my last breath, and if there is anything beyond that, I will love you there too." "I know," Rose said simply, "and I love you the same way, completely, forever, without reservation or doubt." They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something that would last long after they were gone. Their children would carry on their legacy, working the land, raising families, teaching the next generation about love and perseverance, and the courage it takes to choose hope over despair. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the scent of sage and pine and the promise of tomorrow. Samuel closed his eyes, feeling Rose's heartbeat against his side, and thought about the gold coin that had started it all. His father had told him to spend it on something that mattered, and he had. He had bought a woman's freedom and found his own salvation in the process. It had been the best trade he ever made, and he would make it again in a heartbeat. Because Rose had given him something more valuable than gold, more precious than land or cattle or anything else the world had to offer. She had given him a reason to live, a reason to hope, a reason to believe that even the most broken things could be made whole again. And in the end, that made all the difference. The years rolled on, gentle and kind. Samuel and Rose aged together, their steps slower but their love as strong as ever. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, the homestead bursting with life and laughter. Samuel was 76, Rose was 73, and they had lived long enough to see their legacy take root in ways they had never imagined. Sarah and William had built their ranch into one of the most successful in the state. Jacob's veterinary practice had grown to include a partner, and he had written a book on treating cattle that was used by ranchers throughout the West. Lily had married her surveyor and moved to Montana, where they were raising 4 adventurous children who inherited their mother's fearless spirit. The original cabin had been expanded so many times, it barely resembled the rough structure Samuel and Rose had first built. But the heart of it remained, the stone fireplace still drawing properly, the porch still offering the best view of the sunrise. One morning in early spring, Samuel woke to find Rose still asleep beside him, her breathing shallow but steady. They had made a practice in recent years of lying in bed a little longer each morning, reluctant to leave the warmth of each other's presence. Samuel studied her face in the dawn light, memorizing every line and curve, every silver hair and weathered feature. She was as beautiful to him now as she had been on that platform in Beaver, maybe more so because of all the years they had lived together. Rose's eyes fluttered open and she smiled. "Good morning. Good morning, my love. What were you thinking about?" she asked, reaching up to touch his face. "Everything," Samuel said honestly. "About how one choice can change your entire life. About how spending $20 can buy you everything that matters. About how grateful I am for every single day we have had together." Rose's smile widened. "Still romantic after all these years?" "Always," Samuel promised. They rose and dressed, moving slowly, their bodies protesting the cold morning air. But they made it to the kitchen, where Lily had already started coffee. She was visiting for a few weeks, helping around the ranch while William recovered from a broken leg. "Morning, you two," she said cheerfully. "I've got eggs and bacon ready. Sit down and I will bring you plates." They sat at the table Samuel had built 40 years ago, worn smooth by decades of use, and ate breakfast while Lily chattered about her children's latest adventures. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of morning Samuel had learned to treasure. After breakfast, Samuel and Rose took their customary walk around the property. They could not go as far as they used to, but they still made it to the rise where they had first decided to build their house. The valley spread out before them, green with spring growth, dotted with cattle bearing their brand. "You remember standing here for the first time?" Rose asked, "when it was nothing but wilderness and possibility." "I remember thinking you were crazy for wanting to build here," Samuel admitted. "It seemed impossible. But we did it. We did it," Samuel agreed. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on the top of her head. "We took a dream and made it real, together." They stood like that for a long time, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, feeling the warmth on their faces. Samuel thought about all the mornings they had stood in this exact spot, watching their children play, their grandchildren grow, their great-grandchildren take their first steps. This land held all their memories, all their love, all their hopes. "Samuel," Rose's voice was soft. "Yes, thank you for that day in Beaver, for spending your last coin on me, for giving me a life I never could have imagined." Samuel turned her around to face him, cupping her face in his hands. "You have got it backward, Rose. You are the one who gave me life. I was already dead inside when I met you. You reminded me how to live, how to hope, how to love. Everything good in my life started the moment I saw you on that platform." Rose's eyes filled with tears. "We saved each other." "Yes," Samuel agreed. "We did. And I would do it all again, every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt, just to end up here with you." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that tasted of coffee and morning air and 50 years of love. When they pulled apart, both were crying, but they were happy tears, tears of gratitude and joy and the profound contentment that came from a life well lived. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Samuel thought about that gold coin one more time. His father had been right. He had spent it on something that mattered. He had bought freedom for a woman with fire in her eyes, and in return she had given him everything. A home, a family, a legacy, a reason to live. It had been the best $20 anyone had ever spent, and the interest had been compounding for 50 years, paid out in love and laughter, and the simple, profound joy of waking up next to the person you chose and who chose you back. As they climbed the porch steps, Rose squeezed his hand. "I love you, Samuel Zachariah." "I love you, Rose Zachariah," he replied. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." They went inside together, ready to face whatever the day might bring, secure in the knowledge that they faced it as they had faced everything else. Together. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life in the light. Two people who proved that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that hope could spring from the most barren soil, and that sometimes, spending your last gold coin on a stranger with fire in her eyes was not just an act of charity. It was an investment in forever.